Welcome back, everybody. Today I'm with Hannah, and I'm really excited to talk to Hannah today because I've known Hannah for quite a long time. Actually, we used to be neighbours, and she's got a brilliant story to tell. Because actually, I really wanted to showcase somebody who has still got her, let's call it, primary career, but she's also got a little side hustle. And I think it's really important to share somebody like Hannah's story, because I often chat to people who are so scared of making any kind of career change because they're like, well, I've worked so hard to get to where I am in my career, and I've got all these qualifications and all this experience, and actually I quite enjoy what I'm doing still, so I don't really want to throw that away. Having said that, I've got this dream of, doing something completely different. And, my answer is always, they're not mutually exclusive. I think, where there's a will and there's a way and all that. And I think there are people who are managing to do both. And Hannah's the perfect example of this. So without further ado, let me say hello, Hannah. So happy that you agreed to be on this podcast. Thank you so much.
No, that's exciting.
Yeah, and we might just delve straight into what you were doing before you made this sort of, like, let's say, a half change.
Yes. So I am by trade a pilot. So I started in the Air Force when I was about 20 and did about 11 years on transport aeroplanes at Burroughs Norton, and then had a couple of children. And then after, or halfway through, I suppose, having kids, I then, British Airways started recruiting. So I then applied and have been with British Airways for the last 7 years.
So just stopping you there, because actually you say it like, it was dead easy. I just went from military to, aircraft to, what do you call it?
Civilian.
Commercial aircraft. Yeah. And I know from speaking to lots of people, friends and family who have been in the military, who actually left the military, you're making it sound much easier than it actually is, I think. Can you talk us about that? Well, how did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you sign on in the military, or at least I did. I signed on to a permanent commission. So that was, 16 years. So that should have taken me up to my 38 point. But you can leave earlier. And it was, so I got into aviation. My dad's an ex British Airways pilot, and my mum used to be an air hostess and all that sort of stuff. So I've kind of grown up on aeroplanes and just loving the whole travel perspective, and I find that really important. But I was looking, I think it was when I was about 18, 19, when I'd finished my A-levels, I was looking at joining British Airways, and then September 11th happened and recruitment stopped overnight. Went to university and had never thought about the Air Force, but I joined the Air Squadron just to get some flying experience, see if I actually liked flying the airplane, or that I'm sure I was good at it. And
what did you study at university? Was it something
I did psychology, because again, it wasn't something, because I kind of knew that I wanted to fly, and you don't have to have a degree to fly an aeroplane. So again, I kind of, rather than choosing something that was going to force me down a path, I chose something that I was generally interested in. So and I've generally always found that there's no point in trying to do something that you think you have to do, because you won't put the effort in and you won't be interested in it. So I did psychology, joined the Air Squadron, had a great time. I'm meeting up at the weekend with a load of Air Squadron friends who I've known obviously now for 20 odd years. I had a great time and I applied. And again, it's another thing. There's no point in making a decision or trying to give yourself options until you actually have an option. So it's all very well saying, shall I join the Air Force? Maybe shall I, try the civilian route in a different way? But I thought, well, I'll try the Air Force. I'll apply for it. And then if I get in, then I've got an option. So then I know what I can do, either go down that route or go down a different route. Anyway, went for selection and I got in, and again, really good. I loved it, because you can do it that way around. You can't do the civilian route and then the military route. So I did 11 years flying transport aeroplanes, air-to-air refueling. Again, really, really good fun. And I was grounded with my second child, because as soon as you find out you're pregnant, then you have to declare it and you get put on a ground roll. So I was doing that, and somebody, again, I'm not entirely sure why, I didn't really know it, but somebody said, British Airways has started recruiting. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's nice. But I still had a return of service. when you sign on to a new aeroplane, you have to do a certain length of time before you're allowed to either leave or move off on something else. But under maternity regulations, which again, I didn't really know about, you don't have to come back to work. So I could just have my baby and then leave the Air Force. So it kind of, British Airways had, that was almost, so this was back in 2015. That was almost the first time since September 11th happened that there was heavy, massive recruitment from the airlines. Yeah. So it was my first opportunity. And whilst it wasn't the greatest time, being fairly getting more and more pregnant as the selection process was going through and kept having going back and forth to up to Heathrow to go and do aptitude tests and then interviews. And I went for my interview when I was about 38 weeks pregnant, which was always a bit of a talking point. But these things, you just have to take the opportunities when they arise, and you can use them as a barrier, or you can just go, you know, what's the worst that's going to happen? They're either going to say no, when they're not going to say no because you're pregnant, because they're kind of not allowed to do that. But, you know, it's kind of, you don't know when the next opportunity was going to arise. Yeah. So yeah, I did that, and then went back when I'd had Will. I went back 3 months later to do the simulator assessment, and passed. And then I joined, I think I started about 6 months after that. So yeah, I mean, the processes of all of these things are not easy. And there's a lot of work that goes into the interview prep and making sure that you're able to, fly the simulator, and which again wasn't easy when I hadn't flown for best part of 18 months because I've been, you know, up all night having kids. But again, you know, you've either got to, if I didn't do that, then I think then Brexit happened and they stopped recruiting again, and I would have had to wait another few years. And yeah, it's just a case of you just have to, put yourself forward and just
while the iron's hot. And then how did it, you know, what happened first? Did you get offered the job with BA before you quit the military, or the other way around?
Yes, I think I did. But with British Airways, then you say the date that you're able to start. So I wanted to make sure that I could have I took as much leave as I was allowed from the Air Force, and I kind of, you know, added it up and said I can start on this date. So you know, the overlap was, there wasn't any, you basically say to BA, I can start on this date, and you tell the Air Force I'm going to finish on this date. So it's, it kind of, that worked, you say lucky or whatever, that kind of worked nicely. So yeah.
And was it scary leaving the military for you? That's a very leading question, isn't it? But how did it feel for you to?
Was it scary? I suppose in that sense, you do become slightly indoctrinated. Like not everything's done for you, but everything's, you kind of, you know, you always go onto base and you've got the medical facilities, and there's always kind of a department that you know that you can go to get something sorted. So I suppose in that sense, it maybe was, but then I've never kind of, we lived on base for about a year, but apart from that, I've always lived off base. I've always had my own circle of friends. So I suppose in that sense, I didn't necessarily find that it was that tricky, the kind of swap over. And as much as I work in the military, I never felt myself like really, I loved it, but I loved the job more than being in the Air Force. I loved just flying the airplanes and being able to do the different tasks that we were doing. And I loved the people that I worked with. That was always quite good fun. That's probably one of the main differences. The people in the Air Force that you work with is a much smaller team, whereas you go out into the civilian world and you are like, there's just, you know, what were there, 50 pilots on the squadron that I was working with, and there's like 4,000 pilots at British Airways. So you're always going to fly with different people, and it's always going to be a different day. So that was probably a bit tricky. Different. Yeah. But that's, you know, changes is good, anything. And I definitely found, I think this is maybe when talking about moving careers. So obviously I was doing the same job, but in an entirely different background. But I left the Air Force when I was still enjoying it. I left because I found a different opportunity, not because I was absolutely hating it. And I think that's definitely, I definitely made the sweet spot to do that. And I still look back fondly on my days and the people that I worked with and the task. And yeah, gosh, there were terrible places to stay, and there was not, you know, all of my time, pretty much all of my time was spent going in and out of it was doing Afghanistan stuff. So but in that sense, that was still great. It sounds awful, but that was great fun. It was good fun flying, and it was challenging. So I left when I was still enjoying
Your
it.
Your definition of fun might be slightly different to most people's definition.
But I suppose, yeah, I mean, I suppose, why did you join the military? To see some, and again, you know, my kind of action as I suppose was probably very different from somebody who was flying a helicopter at 50 feet in the middle of Afghanistan, being shot at on a daily basis. Yes, that mine wasn't that, but to be able to fly an airplane that was effectively an airliner in a tactical environment was challenging. So it was, you know, something that you'd never get to do anywhere else. So yeah,
No, quite. It's
fun.
I guess a sense of adventure, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So we've got to, so you're now juggling motherhood with 2 young kids.
Yeah.
You've started as a BA pilot.
Yeah.
And then talk us through what happened next, because that's actually what we're here to talk about, isn't it?
Yeah, so everything's going swimmingly. So when I say juggling, my husband's an airline pilot as well. So we do have it's not an easy juggle necessarily, but we have a part-time nanny, so which is, you know, she is part of the family and has been with us for 7 or 8 years now, and she's amazing. So we have, whilst it's a juggle, everything, you know, we it's kind of run with military precision with the calendars and all that sort of stuff, but going swimmingly, we're able to manage it and it's all fine. And then as these things are kind of cyclical, especially in the aviation world, something from something worldwide happens. So you have things like September 11th, you have the financial crisis, and always these things, the first thing to go is aviation. The first thing to really massively be affected is aviation, and obviously COVID happens, which was, I mean, I don't want to say unprecedented, just I don't think anybody thought it would become exactly what it did become. So you kind of hear these mootings, and we kind of thought, oh, okay, well, yeah, we'll close the borders, and, you know, we'll do something for, you know, a few months. Nobody kind of saw it lasting. You
know what, I just have to tell you, we went on holiday in February 2020, and I remember being at the airport, and I would say about 30 to 40% of people were wearing masks, and we were like, this is weird. Like, either we're suddenly surrounded by a load of hypochondriacs, or they know something we don't know, and obviously now we know.
Yes, yes.
Hindsight, but yeah, interesting times for sure. Yes, so back to your story.
So yeah, I mean, so COVID happens. So that was what, March, we all went into lockdown, March 2020. And we're not really told much. I mean, obviously, if the government closed all the borders, ish. I suppose they didn't massively close our borders, but they grounded aeroplanes and stopped everyone from traveling. And yeah, it was kind of a bit like, well, you know, we'll shut everything down. I think initially for us it was going to be sort of September 2020, so for a few months. And obviously everyone's in lockdown anyway. And I suppose in that sense, I do look back at it and go, well, the upshot was that we didn't have to do any home working. So, you know, the having to juggle working from home and looking after kids when the kids closed, the schools were closed, must have been absolutely horrendous. But on the flip side, we didn't have to work because we were all grounded and just told to go home. And we were able to then just spend nice days going for walks with the kids, and we live in the middle of the country, and I'm just able to go out, and you're like, you go for a run and I'll go for a run, and then, you know, we'll go and take the kids out and learn how to ride the bikes, and isn't this idyllic? But then on the flip side of that, we were playing pretty much for the first 3 months redundancy bingo of, and it was because we weren't getting anything from our companies. It's just rumor and conjecture. What's happening in the papers? What's this? What's that? And so yeah, it was an absolutely, I mean, absolutely, there's no other words for it, horrendous time of going, oh, I think actually from what I've heard, yeah, you're probably going to be sacked today. from what the way that they're going to restructure their business, but I think I'll be all right. And then you'd hear something else on the grapevine and be like, oh no, I think actually they're going to do it this way, so I think I'll be all right, but no, I think you're going to be. Just there's no other word for it. It was one of the most stressful times I've ever, and I hope never to go through that sort of experience ever again. But then I found that we both, yes, long story short, I suppose, Matt's company restructured in one way, and he was on an airplane that they kept, so he kept his job. And I suppose I did keep my job, but I didn't really know that until, I suppose I didn't really believe it until I actually got back airborne again 22 months later. It literally wasn't, because all of the regulations kept changing. We were supposed to be coming back in the September. Then I think they put our airplane back until the February, March time in 21. Then it was, I think, back in the summer of 21, and then they kind of cut their losses when the American borders weren't opening, and then just said, we're going to put your airplane, because I'm on the really, really big airplane that needs a lot of people on it to make it work. And to make it financially viable. So they weren't going to put people on that airplane, put the airplane back into the sky unless they knew that they could properly fill it and make it work. So it wasn't until we was then put back until February, March 2022. And again, even looking back from what we thought it was going to be for a couple of months in in the summer of 2020, for it then to be at the beginning of 2022 was just, kind of a bit a long time. So in the mix of that, obviously husband's kept his job, he's going flying, but I still think potentially I'm going to be made redundant, because it was such a movable feast that no one could actually say, even though people were like, oh, British Airways have never made a pilot redundant. They then did make a few people. Luckily I wasn't one of them, but I kind of thought, well, I need something else, because as I've mentioned, it's a very volatile business, and and again, we work, the aviation industry is a different one that works different from anybody else, and it's last in, first out. So if you were a junior in the company, they sack people from the bottom up. So I'd only been in there for, at this point, 4 years, and felt pretty vulnerable. And I suppose my kids were getting older as well. And I have the joy of the job is that I go to work, I physically go to work. And when I'm at home, so I go to work for 3 or 4 days, 3, 4, 5 days at a time. Then when I come home, I don't have to do, I drive home, I dump all of that stuff. And it's like, right, what have I got to do? Right, kids have got classes, we've got this, we've got that. I'm fully invested in home. But then when they're at school, I can fill my days perfectly happily, but I was kind of thinking that maybe there was something else I could do to fulfill my time. And also, once you've kind of been on your aeroplane for a little bit, there's not a huge amount of extra learning. There's not a huge amount of extra fulfillment, I suppose, in that you stay on the same aeroplane for as long as you want to, decades at a time. And so just something else just to keep you learning. You've got to use it or lose it. So if you don't keep using your brain, then you're going to suddenly become a bit boring, dull and silly. So I was kind of maybe thinking that before kind of COVID came along, but again, never had the time, or never perceived that I'd have the time or the inclination to do it. I was chatting to some old Air Force friends, and in the Air Force you used to get these things called, or maybe you still do, learning credits. So you got 3 chunks of money to be able to spend on courses. So my first 2 were used in the Air Force to get my ATPL airline transport pilot license. And then I didn't really remember what I'd done with the 3rd one until somebody mentioned, when the whole COVID thing is happening at the beginning, we're all on WhatsApp chats of going, what have you heard? And, this, that, and the other. And I found out I called back up the same number that it was 5 years previously, and the same lady who's still sat in the office at Bryce Norton, and called her up and said, hi, this is me. This is my number. I'm not sure if I still have any learning credits left, because someone said they still have like a 10-year validity after you've left.
Oh gosh, even after you've left the military.
Even after you've left the military.
Cool.
So and she said, hold on, let me look on the system. Yes, you've still got one of your learning credits, which is £2,000 worth of course to use up. And I think at that point she said, and you've got another year to use it. So if, again, all these kind of like ducks in a row that I wouldn't have thought about learning credits had I not had this random WhatsApp chat or been on this random, ex-military WhatsApp chat that I was on. And specifically at the time when we were still going through, are we going to be made redundant? It was like, right, how long have we got left in the house before we can't pay the mortgage? How, what else can we, right, we're not paying for classes anymore, we don't need to pay for this, what can we do to hunker down and save as much money as possible? My sister did a sports massage course 10 years ago, and it's something that I kind of always thought, I was just in the military, I was never able to go, I can sign on to a course every weekend. Doesn't work like that, so I never was able to dedicate the time to it. So kind of sports massage, I suppose, was in the back of my head, something maybe like personal training, from a fitness perspective. But again, all of these things are going, yes, but we're in COVID, and these are all things that you need to be with somebody to do, and like be in close proximity to strangers, and we can't do that. So it was a bit like, what are you doing? But again, I went with it. I found an amazing place in Cirencester that knew about the military learning credits that I had, and I chatted to them, and it was exactly what I needed. They were amazing. So I signed up and I started studying with the kids running around, which is always a bit tricky. But again, it was just quite nice, once again, everyone had this in COVID. I think whilst it was nice not to have anything to do, as humans, you need a focus and you need a purpose. So I did find that was quite a nice thing to have, that I could then go, right, kids, this is we're going to do a Joe Wicks, as everybody did, and then we kind of structure our day of like, now we're going to do a walk, and then we're going to have lunch, and then we'll do this. And I said,
make the sourdough.
Make the sourdough, which I still do now. That was amazing. Matt used to have to bring because we had flour. We had a flour shortage as everything else. And when he used to go off to wherever he was going, like New York or something, I'd be like, can you please bring back some bags of flour? So I can make my bread. Oh dear, the stuff that we used to have to do.
Extreme desperation.
Desperation. I need my bread. But yeah, so then I'd structure my day of going, right, mummy needs to study, so you guys are going to go off and do this. Go out with daddy, and I'll study for a couple of hours. Again, it wasn't, I remember calling up my tutor when, a lot of it was online, or the first bit was online, learning body parts, technique, going through all the PowerPoint slides and all that sort of stuff. Again, and I haven't properly studied, I suppose, in that sense, something different for a while. I did a background in, psychology and biology. I did at A-level, but so I did have a fair working knowledge, but not into the detail that you'd need for sports massage. So that was a little bit tricky, but I remember then when the restrictions eased and you were able to go back into the classroom, I think I signed up at the end of April, May time, and we could go back in whatever it was, June or July, I think.
So this is 2020, still like in the first year.
Yes, in the first year. Yeah, so I mean, COVID, so we're talking about March was when I was pretty much grounded. April, we're kind of like, what's actually going on? And then I think, end of April into May is when I kind of thought, right, I'm going to lose a job, let's sort something out, and found out about this and kind of signed up. But yeah, went into the classroom in kind of June, July time, I think. But even then, I remember calling up my tutor saying, I can't do this. I haven't learnt enough. I don't know the muscles. I don't know the insertions. I don't know any of this. And this was then about to go into the classroom to then go and do all the hands-on stuff. And he said, and he was brilliant. And we all have these, I'm not good enough. I can't, I don't know what I'm doing. What am I doing? I can't, this is just silly. I need a few more months just to try to get my head. And I called up my tutor, and he was like, the course is all hands-on, it's all learning, it's all just, we go with the flow. And I pitched up on whatever it was, the Monday, and it was great. But we still all have these, what am I doing? I'm not good enough, I can't do this, what am I doing moments. But again, just,
But you overcame them.
you just have to, well, yeah, because you can't just sit in a corner and rock and go, I can't do it. What else are you going to do? There's nothing else to do. Might as well have gone and filled my time in a classroom rather than sat at home still.
Exactly. But I mean, I just love the fact that you learned to become a massage therapist during COVID. It was the last thing on anybody's mind was to be in close contact with anybody. I just love that you know, like a salmon swimming upstream, going against the grain. I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. So then what happened? So then I presume, so you trained, you qualified, and then you've now set up your own little, not little, your side hustle.
My little side hustle. So yeah, it was so I did 2 levels. I signed up just because with the money that I had, I signed up to 2. So the first one, the level 3, is the one that you need to be able to get your qualification and to be able to get paying clients and to get insurance. So I remember walking out of the exam, having passed the exam, and it was in October. So it took about 6 months to be able to do all the learning. I set up in the garage, so it was nicely well ventilated, and when you were allowed to see people. So this was all within the regulations. And then I passed the exam and I walked out of this exam, and then we went into lockdown, the second, like, whatever stupid circuit breakery, whatever language they were using at the time, literally the next day. And I just thought, come on now, this is, you know, I'm trying to do something else here, and now even that you've kind of then gone and put the kibosh on it. But yeah, so we came out of lockdown, and then I remember setting up my website. Again, I'm not very, it sounds really silly, a bit silly because I fly an airplane, but I'm not very computer savvy. I didn't have to use, you know, websites or PowerPoints or any of that sort of stuff on a regular basis. Sorry, this is
just different skills, isn't it?
This is the thing. So it's entirely, but you know, you're not silly about it. And there's so many tutorials and all these sorts of things. You just kind of go, right, well, this is me, I'll take a picture. What have you done? And set up my website, and I put I put a note out on my Facebook group in the village and the surrounding villages, and I remember when I got the first reply back, and I was like, oh my goodness, I've got a client, someone wants to come and see me, this is really exciting, like scary, because you're kind of very scary, because you're so far out of your, even though I've trained, you still have this, and I suppose I still get this when I go into work, goodness, to fly an aeroplane sometimes, and it's be a bit like, wow, okay, yeah, I can do this, can't I? Like, it's just weird. I don't know if it's a woman thing or but yes, a bit like yes.
This is brilliant for anybody listening to this who's scared of flying. You've just like properly you've probably ruined the flying experience for them forever now. And as a very competent pilot, everybody, very, very competent. She knows what she's doing, really.
Yeah, it's all good. But you do still have, in any walk of life, you do still have, or I do, I don't know, I mean, I suppose it's different. It's different in the sense that, you know, with my own business now, that and this is why I like it, that somebody comes to see me, it's entirely driven by me, whereas flying my airplane, I'm a number. So they need 3 people to go and fly this airplane from here to there, right? I get my roster, blah, blah, done. You need that numbered person needs to go. They don't care it's me. Nobody cares who's flying their airplane. They just want to make sure they get there safely from A to B, which you will. But it doesn't matter that it's me. And but the flying thing feeds my joy of travel. I absolutely love going to work and pressing the buttons, and you know, I'm flying amazing aeroplane, and I'm incredibly lucky to do that. But that is almost, I call it selfish, because that literally is just a joy that I have, that I want to go and do. And I love looking down at or looking up at the stars and looking down at the ground, and I think it's very grounding. It brings a really good perspective in life, which is, I think, also COVID kind of made me have a bit more of a rethink about that sort of stuff, that we can all get very kind of egocentric, I suppose, whereas travel, just, you realize that you're such a teeny weeny little dot in the middle of a lot of other people. And actually, and again, and this kind of feeds when someone goes, I don't know what will people think if I go in this different direction, and what will people think if they do? Who cares? Because you don't know what other people think to a start, and can you affect what somebody thinks? No. So why should you then care what anybody else thinks?
Totally.
Which is, again, I think,
and actually people are only going to think it for about 2 seconds and move on to the next thing.
On to the next thing, because we're so in our own heads that nobody, literally, this is the thing, nobody, and I kind of wish that it's one of my things I'm trying to instill into my kids. I don't know, maybe especially my daughter. I don't know why I think that more than girls, more than boys, but just who cares? Yeah. Just if it makes you happy, and this is, again, I try and get this into say to clients, if it makes you feel better, go and do it, because if you're happy, then you will radiate this contentment around you. Yeah. And no one else is going to this is the thing, no one else was going to kind of say you need to go and do something else, and you feel a bit guilty for taking the time out of not looking after the kids. Or even now I have clients, I still run this out of my home, outside of when I'm flying, and it does take up a lot more of my time, obviously. I mean, that's the point, but I absolutely love it. It still baffles me, as a bit of imposter syndrome, I suppose, that the people are paying to come and see me and have use my skills, and I feel quite a big responsibility for that, because they're using A, their money, and B, a very precious hour of their time. And I suppose it's a privilege in that sense. Then I do get a real joy from that, of something that I don't get from flying an aeroplane, because it's a very faceless task. But no, I really, and it's that I massively enjoy it, but I suppose in that sense it's almost more enjoyable because it doesn't have to be, or for me, I'm lucky at the moment because I kept my job, that it isn't my main job, and I do it for, it's a serious business, but I do it for fun, and so I still get a huge amount of enjoyment from it. Probably more.
Amen to that. I think the world would genuinely be a better place if everybody did work that they did for fun. Yes. And I know it sounds really frivolous, and it sounds, actually some people get really angry when I say this, because they're like, but your job is serious and I need to be earning a certain amount, and people, I do find that people get angry with me, but I think that you can have fun and you can earn money and you can be fulfilled, and I think people get stuck in their ways a lot, which is why I love chatting to people like you, because it hopefully opens people up to the opportunity, or to the possibility that it is possible.
It is possible. And one of the most, it sounds bad, one of the most irritating questions that I find people ask kids, I've got a 7 and a nearly 10-year-old, and people ask them, what do you want to do when you're older? And I don't know why, but it really irritates me, because I think, who cares? Do what you enjoy now. And it's not who cares, because obviously you need to have an idea, and you need to earn, you need to earn money. Completely get that. But you don't need to have any set idea of what it is. Do what fulfills you and you find interesting, and that feeds your soul, but in the same sense that, and then you'll be able to be led into something that you're actually going to enjoy. Like nobody literally sat on their deathbed and going, oh God, I wish I worked more. They kind of wish that, even if that's the way you're going to earn money, make sure that you then find something, and whether or not it's just going to an art class of an evening, find something that you never know. It might not earn you money, for instance, but you might meet somebody there that you then go, oh, actually, do you fancy going on a drawing holiday, and we're going to go painting and all sorts of. And I find now, just chatting to clients, the amount of stuff that I have kind of learnt from other people is just, again, even like random things of places to go, just different perspectives that you get from, it just feeds just a whole different. I've realized I'm probably quite more of a people person than I thought, and that you can just get so much from just having a chat with somebody, and just being able to, when somebody walks out of my treatment room, of just being like, that they're kind of lifted, they're just chilled out a little bit more, and that it makes you, it makes me feel selfish, again, entirely selfish job, because it makes me feel good.
Selfish, but then exactly like you say, you're being selfish about creating joy for yourself, but then that it's the ripple effect, isn't it? Then and you're a better mum and a better partner and a better friend and a better daughter. And you know, it sounds so cheesy, but it's true, isn't it? If you're happy within yourself, then actually it's much easier to be you know, a nicer person to be around.
Really nice person to be around. And it's I think, again, a lot of the times, I suppose, when you'll be talking to people who are like, I couldn't possibly do that, you almost feel like you need to be allowed, you need to be that somebody else is going to say, yeah, you go and do that. It doesn't happen. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you have to be able to take that responsibility for yourself and go, I want to do this, and run with it. And people might not necessarily be fully supportive and kind of think, well, how is that going to work in our life, and how is that going to work with you? And the time that you had to do this, you're not going to have to do that anymore. But you just have to kind of, and again, and maybe is the wisdom of getting older, of just, again, as I come back, just, and I mean, when I say not really caring, I don't mean that you'll become an entirely selfish person, that you don't care about anyone around you, but you've got to just not care what the other person is thinking about in that instance, because you know that actually if you go through and you find something that you're interested in and it feeds you a little bit better, then everything else will roll from that. And I don't know, yeah, we feel, especially, I don't know, as mums, I suppose, and as women, that you kind of have to ask permission for a lot of things and go, oh, would you mind, I'm now not going to be able to do, would you mind looking after the kids a little bit more, or would you mind just taking this? Whereas, I don't know, sometimes that from the opposite set, they don't necessarily feel that. So I definitely did feel like that I was then creating a bit more of a burden. But by doing this, I'm better at managing my time. It's amazing what you can get done when you have more stuff to do.
So true.
Because
isn't there a saying that something like, if you want something done, ask a busy person, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely found that since I think I'm genuinely a very an inherently lazy person. I love nothing more than just a loaf of just sitting and doing nothing. But then since having kids, it's kind of you have to get stuff done in a certain time window, and actually you do get a lot more done because you've got a minimized window to do it. So you go, I wish I could sit down now, but I can't. I've got to go and do this. I definitely get more fulfillment out of actually having a bit more to do. There's a balance. There's obviously an entire balance, but or as I joke that when I go to work to fly, I go to work for a rest. That's my kids to run around.
The number of mums I've heard say I go to work for a rest is it's quite high.
Because one of the hardest, the singular hardest job to do is to be at home and look after kids, because there is no respite whatsoever. So no, I'm incredibly lucky in that sense that I actually just get to up sticks and leave for a few days and drink hot coffee and have
We still love them dearly.
We still love them dearly. And this is another thing, though. This is what people say, kind of, I absolutely adore my kids, but I also need other things. I need other things to fulfill me. I'm not, and again, you kind of, to actually have to say that, and I had to say that out loud a lot of the time in COVID, with just being, I was a grumpy McGrumpster for a lot of the time. That's my husband. But kind of, it's like, it's only a job, it's only flying, it's only this, that, and the other. And it's like, no. I've worked really, really, really hard to get to where I've got to. And I've also now realized, having had it taken away, because I've had time off flying through kids, had to, but that was my choice. And I always knew that I could go back to it when I wanted to go back to it. But this was somebody else is taking away this choice, and I don't like it. And actually, I have to now say out loud, I am not fulfilled being at home all the time. And to mum to say that sounds awful. It sounds horrendous, but I said it, and you just have to run with it. And again, I'm a better mum when I've got other stuff to fulfill myself. So again,
and you're being a great role model for your kids as well. That.
I just think it's a very unrealistic, like now, my dad went to work, my mum gave up work until I think we were 10 or 11. And you know, incredibly grateful that you had the balance of having somebody at home. But I think that's unrealistic now from a financial perspective, that we just don't get, I mean, I suppose you can live your life to whatever finances that you have, but I just don't think it's for us it was something that's was ever going to be an option for one of us to step back from work. But also, you know, I've grown up in a house of two. You know, my eldest sister's a lawyer, the twin sister, you know, they both work, both career-driven people, and we're all career-driven. And it's kind of like, well, I'm not going to give that up now because I really enjoy that. So, and that's part of who I am. And that's part, you know, now amazingly I've got kids, but I also want to be able to work too. And I think that's, yeah, I never apologized to the kids for going away and not being there. That's what mummy and daddy do. That's what I'll do. And they will enjoy it in future times. I'm like, do you want to come to Miami for the weekend? Oh, okay, yeah, fine, that'll be all right. And yeah, it's just what we do. And I don't apologize for it. Maybe I should do, but then in that sense, the kids will never, they don't know any different. And kids will never thank you for anything, do I mean, they'll, you know, you could give up
one day Hannah, they will.
No, one day. But also this is the thing, kind of, you go, no, I need to give up something, I don't want to do this because the kids want me at home. Well, you'll ask them in 10 years time and you said, but I gave this up because I wanted to be at home with you, and they'll be like, oh well, I didn't really notice, or I didn't do that. You know, stay at home if you want to stay at home, but if you want to go and do something else, do it what makes you happy, because nobody else is going to make you happy, or no one else is going to realize you can't do something for somebody else's happiness, because they'll be a bit like, oh, I didn't realize you did that. And you think, brilliant, great, thanks for that. Yeah, so.
Oh my God, Hannah, I feel like we could talk all day long and still keep going. But I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to chat to me and to share this story that I hope will inspire people who are in a career that they do like, that they do enjoy, that they have worked very hard to achieve, but also look at, you know, what other areas could I get into? What can I do on the side that is going to feed another part of me? You know, absolutely brilliant advice. Thank you so much. And if anybody's been listening to this thinking, oh, actually, my sister, wife, husband, whatever, somebody in your life that is always complaining about the fact that they love their career, but they would like to try something else, then maybe share this episode with them, and perhaps Hannah's story will motivate them to make some kind of change and just dip their toe into something else. So thanks again, and I will see you soon. Bye.